Well, good evening. My name is Michael Ulrich, Director of NYU Washington, D.C. I am happy to welcome you to the Abramson Family Auditorium for NYU's Global Leaders Conversation Series. This is the first of these lectures to be hosted in Washington, D.C., so we're pleased to be here tonight. Dr. Alon Ben-Meir hosts leaders from around the world in conversations that probe critical global issues and explore the policies designed to address them. We hope you will join us for our next DC event in this series on December 3rd with Dr. Alia Hatug-Baran, Ambassador of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in the United States of America. Allow me to introduce you to NYU Professor Ben-Meir, an expert on Middle East politics and affairs, specializing in peace negotiations between Israel and Arab states. For the past 17 years, he has been directly involved in various negotiations between Israel and its neighboring countries, and has operated as a liaison between top Arab and Israeli officials. Dr. Ben-Meir serves as Senior Fellow at NYU's Center for Global Affairs, where he has taught courses on the Middle East and international negotiations. He has authored 7 books related to Middle East policy and is currently working on a new book about the psychological dimensions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Dr. Ben-Meir holds a master's degree in philosophy and a doctorate in international relations from Oxford University. We are also thrilled to be joined by His Excellency Ehud Olmert, who served as Prime Minister of the State of Israel from 2006 to 2009. His government public service career includes serving as Minister of Finance in 2005 and as Minister of Communications from 2003 to 2004. As head of the Likud election headquarters in 2003, he was appointed by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon as Vice Prime Minister and Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Labor. From 1993 to 2000, Mr. Olmert served as Mayor of Jerusalem and led important initiatives in transportation, education, and community development. As Minister without portfolio, he was responsible for minority affairs between 1988 and 1990, and as Minister of Health from 1990 to 1992. Between 1981 and 1989, he served as a member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, as well as on the Finance, Education, and Defense Budget Committees. He began his career in public service in 1973 when he was first elected as member of the Knesset and was re-elected 7 consecutive times. Mr. Olmert earned his Bachelor in Law degrees from Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I hope you'll join us in the lobby for a short reception following the program, and please help me in welcoming our guests tonight.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. President, Professor Ben-Meir, distinguished guests. I was given a short time by the professor, and what I want to do now is to make an experiment with you. I know everyone is expecting on these days to hear from the Middle East about the negotiations with Iran and the other issues which are on the agenda and which are a source of discussions and sometimes disagreements, but I want to stick to what I think is the most important thing, the most important issue, the one that Israel has to cope with and the Palestinians as soon as possible, because it will serve both purposes, both countries, both people's purposes best, in my mind. But what I want to do now is, normally when we discuss the issue of the Palestinians and the need to make peace between us and the Palestinians, the common argument amongst many, and I've been in various places, including various campuses and universities across America and in other countries, especially young people, they talk first and foremost about the moral foundations of this conflict, about on both sides, by the way. Of course, the supporters of Israel remind us of the history of the threats and the fact that the Arab countries and the Palestinians never accepted the resolutions of the United Nations going back to 1947, which could have resolved then the conflict between us and the Arabs and all the Palestinians. And from then on, Palestinians are talking about the occupation as if history started in 1967, and they talk about the pain and the difficulties and the total inadmissibility of acquiring the control of territories by force. I want to put these arguments aside for a second I think they are very important. I have a very clear opinion about what should be the outcome on some of these issues. But I want to now talk about the broader context, and the broader context is, of course, the events which took place in the Middle East over the last few years, what is known as the Arab Spring, which started with a great expectation that this will lead the Arab countries from what were perceived as backward governments, non-democratic governments, into perhaps the emergence of democracy and civil liberties for the people in those countries. The realities are different. And the question is, in that context, now that we look at what happened in Tunisia in the first place and what is the outcome of this in the second place, what happened in Libya at the beginning, getting rid of Muammar Gaddafi, which everyone was happy with, and the taking over of Islamic fundamentalists at the end of the process. Egypt, Syria, of course, there is a change of perception of some of these, the impact of some of these events on the Middle East, and a sense of a growing instability that threatens the Middle East and perhaps may lead into all kinds of confrontations that are dangerous and that are certainly undesired. I must say that I personally, from the outset, had much greater expectation as for the what is known as the Arab Spring, and that today, knowing what developed through the last 3 years, I haven't changed my mind about this process, and I think that this is a positive process, even if the outcome of it will perhaps take somewhat longer time than expected initially by some naive people who thought that the transition from total lack of democracy into complete democracy in the terms which are known to us living in the Western countries for generations with democracy can be a matter of weeks or months, and it may take much longer. I remember very well that I had this argument publicly when the Muslim Brothers took over in Egypt. And the argument was, look what happened. They were complaining about Hosni Mubarak. I must say, in brackets, that from the point of view of the relations with Israel, Hosni Mubarak was a very positive leader. He protected the peace process between Israel and the Egyptians for 30 years against a strong opposition which was against it. And he created a much greater stability, which was essential in our part of the world. That does not mean that within Egypt there was democracy, on the contrary. And therefore, lots of people said, okay, as far as you are concerned, you may regret the fact that Hosni Mubarak was overthrown by the opposition. But what do you want? This is the expression of democracy, and according to the democracy in Egypt, following elections which from the outside appear to us to be representative and democratic, the Muslim Brothers took over. I felt then, and I said it, and now I'm not arguing it in order just to show that I was right or someone else was wrong, but I want to prove a certain line of thinking. I thought that the most important thing is the fact that the original revolution in Egypt, which is the most important, the most populated, and the most significant Arab country, certainly in the Middle East, is the fact that the revolution erupted from the grassroots. It was not organized, it was not manipulated, it was not encouraged by any organized political party such as the Muslim Brothers. As a result of the revolution, as a result of the ousting of Hosni Mubarak, there were elections, and it became obvious quite early that the only power that was organized enough to manipulate this process in order to gain power was the the Muslim Brothers, of which Mubarak was very much afraid for many, many years. At least I can remember many times that I talked with him, and he always said, you better tell your friend George Bush that if he wants democracy in Egypt, just let him watch what happened in Gaza when he advocated the participation of the Hamas in the elections and how much democratic it is. But, which was a very sound argument. But as it turned out, and I felt it from the outset, is that the Muslim Brothers will be very hesitant to abuse the power that was given to them by sheer luck and coincidence and the circumstances which were beyond their control, because they know one thing: the same powers that kicked out Hosni Mubarak will do the same to them if they will abuse the rights and the privileges that were given to them by the process which took place. And sure enough, it did happen. And it did happen because the Muslim Brothers were so enthusiastic, were so carried away by the fact that after so many years of being, according to their arguments at least, persecuted by the government in Egypt, that they are now in power, that they forgot this fundamental rule, and they did more or less the same, and then the grassroots erupted again and kicked them out. Now there is not democracy in Egypt yet. It may take much longer time before the democratic institutions are built in a proper and balanced manner so that it will really become a democratic country. But the most important phenomenon, which is known as the Arab Spring, is not necessarily the immediate outcome of this, but the very fact that people in countries which were controlled over many years by strong, powerful, and sometimes brutal mukhabarat, and you know mukhabarat is the secret service, the domestic secret service, which is in charge of making sure that the government will always be safe and strong, that in none of those countries the mukhabarat was powerful enough to resist the pressure of the grassroots that ultimately overthrown it. And I think that this is an important breakthrough that will have to develop in a direction which will change the nature of the Middle East and of those countries in the Middle East which were not known to be democratic. There is one thing which can help move it forward more rapidly and can change entirely the face of the Middle East, and this is if there will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, when I talk with my friends and my rivals in the state of Israel, I say, as I say this evening here, let's put aside for a second all these arguments about do we want to have a democratic state, do we Do we want to have a Jewish state? How can we have a Jewish state and a democratic state if we don't give full civil rights and equal rights and political rights for millions of Palestinians that live under the control of the state of Israel for now more than 45 years? And how much longer do we think we can hold it without being boycotted in the same way that today other countries are boycotted by the international community? Regardless of whether the circumstances are entirely different, the history is entirely different, the ambitions are entirely different, doesn't matter. But we may be put in the same very unpleasant situation. Because the world will not tolerate right, wrong, good, bad, doesn't matter, will not tolerate the continued occupation by the state of Israel of millions of Palestinians in territories which may historically, and I believe historically, are linked to the most sensitive nerves of Jewish history, but which are inhabited by people who do not want to live with us. So we have to make a choice. Either, if we force them to live with us, we have to give them full rights, with all the possible ramifications for the nature of the state of Israel if they will become a majority, or we have to separate from them so that they will live in their state, they will exercise their right of self-determination, they will be another full state in the United Nations, and we will have our borders recognized by the international community and by the United Nations, and the separation will become a reality that may lead into all kinds of different things. Now, okay, this is the fundamental moral argument. What I want to say is that for the Middle East, peace between Israel and the Palestinians is a unique opportunity once in a history of thousands of years that can make the Middle East into an entirely different region from what it was for the last 100 years that it has occupied. The energies, the revenues, the involvement of the whole world almost in endless confrontations and tribal wars and ethnic wars and religious wars in this part of the world, which is one of the richest and one of the least developed regions in the whole world. If there will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians, set aside all the other arguments, I am absolutely certain that in a short period of time there will be peace between Israel and all of the moderate Arab countries, which will include Saudi Arabia, which will include all the Arab Emirates, which will include all the others. It will create, it will take time, of course. Those who believe that historic processes can take weeks and months and they must show dramatic changes, they may be disappointed. But I believe that if we will make this agreement within a reasonable period of time, which I think is possible within few months, then in my lifetime, I will be able to see a Middle East where there is partnership, genuine partnership, fruitful partnership, powerful partnership between Israel and Arab countries, which will make this part of the world the most developed in comparison to any other part of the world. The combination of what we can do together is almost unlimited. And it waits for a leadership that will have the courage to go beyond the obvious, and particularly the courage to go beyond the rhetoric that is popular in the two sides, for the grassroots, for the large part of the population, into a new narrative that will speak about the almost unlimited opportunities that these new realities will create for both sides, and how it can be used to ultimately change it into what it can be. No one, I always thought so. I had never illusion that America or Europe or any of the other countries of the West or the Far East will be able to resolve for us in our region what we don't want or can't do ourselves. And I think that we have all the potential, all the revenues in our part to make the Middle East the richest and the most advanced part of the world. Look what happened in Israel over the last 65 years. In spite of all these difficulties and constraints and threats and wars and the need to absorb millions and millions of people that came from so many different backgrounds and cultures and languages and whatnot, and how successful, stable, and relatively wealthy the state of Israel is without any of the natural resources which our neighbors have. Now, can you imagine that this dynamics, this spirit, this energy, together with these resources, will join forces together, what it can do? I think that it's incumbent on us, on all of us who live there, to do it. No one else will do it for us. I have enormous respect for a gentleman who lives not far away, I guess, from here. It's John Kerry. He's the U.S. Secretary of State, and to the President's efforts to bring the sides closer to each other so that they will talk about these issues and will try to resolve them. But when I was Prime Minister, I knew that no one will do it better than what we can do together. I felt that then, I feel that now. I think that it is very useful to have friends who are supportive of this process, but at the end of the day, it will be incumbent upon the leaders of the two people to forget the pains of the past in order to promote the opportunities of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Olmert. You know, I could not agree more with just about everything you've said. The problem is you left me, you didn't give me another opportunity to argue with you about any of this. So
well, I apologize. That happens sometimes.
That said, I want to pick up where you have left us with. In 2008 and 9, under your leadership, a very serious negotiations took place between Israel and the Palestinians. And I believe you've said yourself that we have reached an agreement on nearly 90% of the conflicting issues. What was it that the last reached 10% over which there was no agreement, and from your perspective, and why peace was not pursued from that point on?
Well, I don't really know to say, accurately that 90% was agreed and 10% was still left for further discussions. Maybe 98% was agreed and only 2% was left for. I think 100% was agreed. The issue was not any differences or any margins in the basic strategy or the basic plan. What I've proposed to the Palestinians is what they have been saying that they want for over 40 years at that time. It was 2008. In terms of the basis of the territorial solution, I talked about the 1967 borders as a basis with swaps of territories, as is accepted by the Palestinians, accepted by the international community. I said the basis will be 67. If we take some, we'll give some.
But that's it. What was the specific conflicting issue?
There were no conflicting issues.
Then why there was no agreement?
A lack of courage, I believe. A lack of confidence in the Palestinian side that if I will not be prime minister, that this same plan that was proposed by me will still prevail. I think so, but honestly, I think you have to ask the other side. This is the first time. I think I take pride in this, not because I proposed something which was revolutionary. I proposed what everyone knew is what was the only plan possible to bring the two sides to the point where they can't disagree anymore.
But
the question was, and this was done by Israel. Israel did it. So everyone who comes to me and says, but you don't want peace, I said, excuse me. I proposed, and there is no disagreement about it, that I proposed this, and this. The ones that didn't give a positive answer was the Palestinian side. Now you ask me why? Go to Abu Mazen, invite him here. Maybe there will be more people coming, and he will have to give his answer. I can only say this. I proposed it. Abu Mazen himself said, had Olmert stayed another 3 months in power, there would have been peace between Israel and the Palestinians. It may have taken him more time to absorb it, more time to convince his own opposition, more time to move the process within the Palestinian community in order to accept it. I don't know. I can't answer for him. I know one thing, I've proposed it.
But are you then suggesting that the Israeli public would have accepted any kind of solution
of course
that you have proposed? Why do you say of course?
Look, when you come to the Israeli public and you tell them that this is dangerous and this is dangerous and this is a matter of existence and another thing is a matter of existence, people tend to believe to the leaders, particularly when they caution them about serious dangers that may destroy the existence of the state of Israel. And with Jewish history and with Jewish memories and with Jewish background, it is not so difficult.
But then again...
But I had a plan how to change this. This was part of the strategy, not just how to give it to Abu Mazen, but how to mobilize the entire world to join forces with us in order to convince the public opinion of Israel that this is the best solution for Israel. I am not, by the way, you may misunderstand, so I have to explain to you. I was the Prime Minister of Israel, and what I did was not in order to help Palestinians. I wanted to help Israel because I thought that it is important for Israel to have a peace treaty.
But let me just touch on an issue that I have been dealing now with for some time. There was one of the main impediments, in my view, was the public narrative that both Israel and the Palestinians have been engaged for decades. Now, you say that the Palestinians could not accept it because they could not really go to the public and say, we have agreed to this, we have given up on the issue of Palestinian refugees.
They haven't given up on anything.
Well then, why do you, or at least it's been said, that you thought that you were very close to reaching an agreement? What is it that they refused to accept?
Look, the Palestinians said for 45 years that they want, to have the 67 borders. President Bush, in his famous letter on the 14th of April 2004, wrote to the Prime Minister of Israel that the final permanent agreement will be based on the 67 solutions, but not accurately the same line, which no one really knows to draw, but it will be based on the 67s with possible territorial swaps, considering the fact that there were demographic changes over the years, and the Jews live in some bulks of centers in the West Bank. So if these parts will remain under the sovereignty of Israel, equal-sized parts that were part of the state of Israel prior to 67 will be given to them. I proposed it, one-on-one. So this is one issue which we said to the Palestinians, not 90%, 100%, this is what you want. Number two, they said they want that the Arab part of Jerusalem will be under the sovereignty of the Palestinian state. I agreed. And you mentioned, the president mentioned before, I mean, he made a dramatic historical mistake. but I forgive him. He said that I was mayor from 1993 till 2000. No, I was a mayor from 1993 till 2003. So 3 years is a lot of time in Israeli politics. Jerusalem politics, very long time. So I know something about Jerusalem, and I know something about the sensitivity of Jerusalem and the importance of Jerusalem. But believe me, I read all the history of Jerusalem. I read important books that were written by the most important researchers and archaeologists and historians that wrote about Jerusalem. I don't remember that anyone mentioned Jabal Mukaber as part of the history of the Jewish history of Jerusalem. Why do we need it?
Let me just go back.
No, this is important. Let me, Professor Ben-Meir, let me just explain, because these guys, they don't know what you know. So they may not know certain things that you know, take for granted as obvious. In 1967, when Jerusalem was taken over by the State of Israel, there were two generals and one Israeli who was considered to be an expert about Jerusalem. They were sitting and they decided, okay, we're going to apply and annex Jerusalem into the State of Israel. Well, what is Jerusalem? How do you define the territorial part of Jerusalem which you want to annex to the State of Israel? They drew a map. This map has no connection to what we thought Jerusalem was in the first place when we, for 2,000 years, were praying for Jerusalem. You always can say, of course, the Western Wall is part of Jerusalem. For us, the old city is part of Jerusalem in any way you look at it. But Jabal Mukaber, Abu Dis, Isawiya, Anata, Beit Hanina, they were not part of the city of Jerusalem. So I agree that all these parts will be given to the Palestinians with the 300,000 Arabs that live there, so that in 15 years there will not be more Arabs and Palestinians living in Jerusalem under the State of Israel as a Palestinian city, but rather that they will be part of the Palestinian Jerusalem and that it will become the Palestinian capital. As Arafat used to say, I want that Jerusalem, of course, he meant, or whether he meant or not, I don't care, but this is what everyone understood, that this is the part of Jerusalem which is inhabited by Arabs, which is Jabal Mukaber and Israwiya and Abu Dis and Anata and the Beit Hanina and Shafat and all of these places, and Sheikh Jarrah and all these places. I agree with it, number two. Number three, I agree that there will be no sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Not an Israeli sovereignty and not a Palestinian sovereignty. But that the holy basin of Jerusalem will be managed and controlled by under the authorization of the United Nations, not just the Security Council, but the General Assembly of the United Nations. I'm sure it will be given. It will be administered by 5 nations: America, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Palestinians, and Israel. In other words, Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And that there will be free access, of course, to all believers, and all the Jews will be able to go everywhere they want, and the Christians and the Muslims, and so on and so forth. The last thing was the Arab refugees. I agreed that a symbolic number. Now, of course, the question is, why do you have to establish a Palestinian state if you want all the Palestinians to come to the Jewish state? I mean, this is crazy. Of course, this idea of the right of return of Palestinians to original places where they lived was at a time when no one talked about a Palestinian state, but the whole idea of creating a Palestinian state was to establish for the Palestinians the place which will be their homeland. Now, I agreed for symbolic reasons that this issue will be resolved within the context of the Arab Peace Initiative. Everyone who said that Israel did not recognize the Arab Peace Initiative, I was the one who said it in Annapolis, in front of the President of the United States and the President of the Palestinian Authority and the foreign ministers of more than 14 Muslim nations. I said, we are prepared to negotiate this within the framework of the Arab Peace Initiative. And of course, there were security problems that were to be resolved between us and the Palestinians. So there was a response to every single sensitive issue that the Palestinians raised. Abu Mazen kept saying to me and kept sending messages to me all over until now, which I respect, don't say that I said no. And he's right. He never said no. The only problem is that he never said yes. And it's still there. He can pick it up. He can pick it up and come to us and say, this is what you guys proposed.
Let me just ask you then. You just said a few minutes ago, and rightfully so, that only the Israelis and the Palestinians can sit down and negotiate an agreement between them. That is, an outside power is not necessarily the right instrument for that. Now, what has changed from your perspective? If you maintain that a peace between Israel and the Palestinians is possible, what has changed on the part of the Palestinian to make it possible? Anything changed since the time you've been negotiating?
Number one, first of all, I'm not sure that the present government of Israel will support that which I proposed. So I can't speak for the government.
But what do you say?
I'm afraid that at the present time, I'm not in a position to speak for the Israeli government.
But no, I don't want you to
That's
speak
number
on
one.
behalf.
Wait. No, so I don't know. No, you ask me. What about the Palestinians? And I can see that this blonde girl sitting right in front of me wants to ask, and what about the Israeli government? Do they agree to what you proposed? If they don't agree, then what the Palestinians supposed to say?
Okay, well, let's leave Netanyahu then aside.
I leave him.
Let's leave him aside. Now, suppose, wait a second. Suppose you are the prime minister today.
Yes.
Suppose you are the prime minister today.
Yes.
What sort of initiative would you take?
My initiative.
What,
the one that I've now
let me then go
outlined.
back to the first question. Do you think that Mahmoud Abbas will be willing and able to sit down and negotiate under the terms you have just stipulated?
Yes, I think so. Number one, I think that Mahmoud Abbas today is stronger than ever before. Stronger than ever before, strangely enough. Why? Because of what happened in the Arab world, because of the decline of Syria, because the world is now tightening its squeeze over the Iranians, because the Hamas is now in direct confrontation with the Egyptian government, the like of which never happened before. Now the Egyptians are fighting Hamas and are killing Hamas because they understand that Hamas is a source of instability that has developed into a position which is against the interest of Egypt. So it has elevated the strengths, inner strengths, the domestic strengths of Abu Mazen. Therefore, he will be prepared to take more risks. That's one thing. Another thing, he needs to have, I'm not talking now about Israel because you told me not to talk about Israel. But he needs, from his point of view, he needs to have a leader in whom he has trust. Now, you have to ask him if he has trust in me. The problem is that when Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, says, I'm ready to negotiate without any preconditions, and in the next morning he announces that 5,000 more units will be built in the territories, the other side says, you either want to build 5,000 more units or you want to make peace. You can't do together the same thing. So that's the problem, the lack of trust. In my time, there was trust between me and the Palestinian leader, and when he comes here, as you promised, you will ask him, and you will see that he says that there was trust.
But then again, let me just go back to, for a moment. You're talking about these differences, but let us assume for a moment that you are now sitting in front of Mahmoud Abbas, and you are saying that
Yes.
Mahmoud Abbas will go along because he's in a much, much stronger position. What about Hamas? Do you think that Mahmoud Abbas can strike a deal with Israel and ignore Hamas altogether? Is it possible?
It's possible, it's not easy. It's possible because if necessary, if Hamas will try to challenge this, then there are ways to deal with Hamas.
How would you deal with Hamas? And
how
I mean,
would I do?
if any,
I can
if
tell
an,
you.
if an
It will
agree-
not be a very pleasant story, but I can tell you. I am against everyone who is the enemy of peace. I am against any terrorist. I am against anyone who says that he is not prepared to make peace. Look, Gaza, we pulled out entirely from Gaza. I mean, no one can today accuse Israel that we occupy 1 inch of territory from Gaza. Why do they shoot rockets on the cities outside of Gaza, which are part of the state of Israel, recognized by the entire international community? Now, if we will agree with the Palestinians that we also pull out from the West Bank under within a framework which will be accepted to both them and us on the basis of 67 borders, what argument will then remain for Hamas not to be for it? If they will try to oppose it in violent terms, then we will see who is stronger.
But this is not a question who is stronger. So suppose, yes, Hamas knows only too well that if they provoke the Israelis, they will be severely punished for any kind of provocation. But that isn't the issue. But they are perfectly capable of sabotaging any kind of an agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
Professor,
You know, what makes you think that they will not be able to sabotage such an agreement?
I think that they will try, and I think that the combination of A, an agreement, B, a cooperation between us and the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian leadership which is recognized by the international community as the only one that can speak for the Palestinians. To this day, the only person who was elected in a democratic way by the majority of the Palestinians is one person, Mahmoud Abbas. And if he makes an agreement, then there is this agreement, cooperation between Israel and a very significant part of the Palestinian community, and the support of the international community. The combination of these three elements will be stronger than any opposition that can attempt to jeopardize the agreement between Israel and
And in the wake of what's happening in Syria, can you really talk about effective international community and international will?
in that
When
this
people
context,
are being slaughtered day in and day out, I mean, do you really have a trust in the international community or the United Nations Security Council to lift a finger?
no, I don't. No, when I say no, I don't say that I don't have trust in some of those forces, and certainly I have trust in many of them. But that's not the issue. The issue in Syria is different, and we all know that the fact that there was no intervention is because one superpower, or more than one superpower, was protecting the Syrian government, and this was the Russians, perhaps together with the Chinese. This is not the case in the West Bank and in Gaza. There is no superpower. There is only one superpower in this area, and this is the state of Israel. What we lacked in the past when we tried to protect the occupation was a lack of international support. When we will then help the Palestinians to exercise their rights against the rebels from within the Palestinians that are against democracy, against peace, and so on, it will be supported by the entire international community, and we don't need any outside force to intervene. We can do it ourselves.
Okay, let's leave Hamas for a moment, and let's go back to the
I
Israeli...
want to leave them forever.
So let's go back to the current situation. Do you believe that the given time that the United States suggested, 9 months, that Israelis and Palestinians, under the leadership of Netanyahu, what is the prospect of reaching an agreement under these conditions?
Well, if they will accept, both sides will accept this line of thinking that I've elaborated on here, then there is a good chance to do it within less than 9 months. If they will not, then it will not succeed.
But we know that Netanyahu is not in that, does not think in those terms.
Well, I can remember myself in 25 years ago that I was myself in a different position. I changed. So you must always believe in the spirit of people that it can change them when the ultimate responsibility lies on their shoulders. I hope that when Bibi will understand that the alternative for making peace is to perhaps engage in a new intifada that will cost lots of blood for us and for the Palestinians, that he may change his position. I know that he is not in favor of my thinking, and I know that he has opposed it in every possible way that he could, and I think he made a mistake. But at that time he was in the opposition, and I was in government. Now he is himself in government, and he will have to bear the ultimate responsibility, and I hope that when he will realize it, and he will be faced with the possible ramifications of additional confrontation, bloodshed confrontation, that maybe he will change his opinion.
Do you really think?
If not, maybe we will have to change the government.
Do you really think that's going to happen? He's been now 3 times prime minister. He has not changed his mind one single iota. An ideologue like Netanyahu simply ignore the reality on the ground. We know that. He is, just as much as a religious person who does not need evidence to be proven right or wrong. This is what we have today. You have a prime minister who is not committed to peace, albeit he talks about two-state solution, and every action he takes day in and day out are totally inconsistent with the concept of two-state solution. Do you think that he's going to wake one morning and get the lucidity and begin to think, well, time has come?
Look,
what is going to take to change the dynamics in Israel today?
Professor, the last thing that I thought will happen when I appear in Washington, not so far from the White House, in the branch of the New York University, is that I'll be asked to defend Bibi Netanyahu. I could think of many scenarios. This was not part of my original plan. And I'm sorry if I will not be able to give you an answer that will satisfy you and that will be accepted by him, how he will change. I hope that he will change. But in democracy and in many countries, including Israel, it's a day in and there is a day out in a different way.
This is
He can
true.
be in and he can be out if the people of Israel will believe that there is a genuine chance for peace and that it can be achieved without the rhetoric of disaster which characterize this argument whenever we discuss it in the state of Israel, then they will support it. And I have no doubt in my mind that it can be the majority of the public opinion can be mobilized to support it. And even at the cost of losing the great leadership of the present time for another
Netanyahu has nearly 3 more years to go if he may well be able to hold his coalition government together. Do you think that if things do not change in a dramatic way, that the Israeli-Palestinian situation is sustainable? You just mentioned yourself that the likelihood of a third intifada. How much time do we have until such eruption might take place? Suppose he stays in power for the next 3 years.
I'm not afraid that much of the another eruption. This is just an example that I gave. I'm very much afraid, perhaps even more, that the perception of Israel in the international community will be of a country which denies millions of people the fundamental human rights and political rights which they deserve to have, which was the source of what Jews were fighting for all their history. And if that will be the case, then the price that we will be asked to pay will be beyond the ability of Israel to take.
Who is mobilizing the international, the Israeli public? 2 years ago, there were 400,000 Israelis went out demanding better housing, affordable housing, more jobs, more opportunity. But not once there was Israeli demonstration demanding a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In my view, the Israeli public remained complacent at best. And I don't see any movement in Israel today demanding time has come for change. What makes you think that's going to come tomorrow or next? Who's going to mobilize this public opinion?
First of all, I want to remind you that there were many demonstrations in Israel, both pro-agreement and against agreement. And that if you will say it had your guest been one of the leaders of Peace Now movement, you would have been very insulted for you ignoring entirely how many tens of thousands of people they mobilized in Israel against governments which they thought were not sufficiently in favor of promoting a peace between us and the Arabs. So there were many demonstrations. Today it's quiet because there is no terror, and it's true that when there is no terror and there are other issues, people tend to focus on what bothers them at the present time, which is not necessarily the Palestinian issue. But I think that the possible reaction of the international community that I've outlined already before, with the possibility of the eruption of terrorist actions in various parts, can change overnight the attitude of many of the Israelis, and can change overnight the stability of the political system. And I personally think that this is something that is likely to happen sooner than later.
But I have to disagree with you in this regard. I really do, because you
insist on being wrong. I mean,
no. I do follow the Israeli scene very, very carefully.
Yes.
You go randomly take 10, 15 Israelis from the street and ask them, do you trust the Palestinian? I bet you 9 out of 10 will tell you, no, we don't trust the Palestinian. Now you're talking about an entirely different perception, and I maintain that you cannot change that perception unless there is massive, major change in the public narrative by the government, by the various think tanks, by the universities, in school, and that is not taking place, not in Israel and not among the Palestinians. And that is, in my view, the biggest impediment to peace. People are not prepared. How could you possibly, under your tenure, you agreed about Jerusalem, and I think that is admirable. You hear what Netanyahu is saying today? For how much longer you think, the Israelis do not expect ever Jerusalem to become a capital of two states. The Palestinians still sing the same song and dance about the right of return. The dynamics have changed since when you were prime minister, and it's getting worse by the day. Now, I don't believe that you can change that overnight, as you said. Something else is going to have to happen. You need to come back.
I knew from the beginning.
Am I not right?
A long question that lasts almost like a speech must end up with some dramatic, idea. And I was suspecting that he leads to it. So I'll tell you what. It's a great idea, by the way.
But to give him a big hand, huh?
It's a great idea, but I'll tell you what. I'm in the Prime Minister's office. There is a section of the budget which is dedicated for opinion polls. For 3.5 years now, my predecessor and certainly the ones before him used all that budget and asked for more. The present Prime Minister, who was already a Prime Minister before, of course, uses this budget and more. I never made one opinion poll when I was Prime Minister trying to find out what the opinion is, because I tried to follow what Mr. Ben-Gurion used to say. And with all the, I'm not trying to compare myself to Ben-Gurion, who was the greatest Jew perhaps since Moshe Rabbeinu.
Since Moses.
Moses, yes. These guys, you tell them Moshe Rabbeinu, believe me, they know who he is. I'll tell you what. Ben-Gurion said, I don't ask what the people want. I tell them what they need. And leadership is precisely this. You don't go to the street and ask people, 15 people, what do you think? Do you trust them? You don't trust them, and so on. You tell them what they need, and you use the power of your leadership and the power of your position in order to impose it. And then you go to elections. And I'll tell you something. I am absolutely confident, I have no doubt in my mind that I brought an agreement with the Palestinians in lines of what I said for an election. I had a whole plan how to do it, how to build up a momentum, okay, in the public opinion, not just of Israel, of the Palestinians, of the international community, and so on and so forth. I knew exactly what needed to be done. And I done it, and I would have declared this is the agreement. It was approved by the UN Security Council on condition, of course, that it would be approved by the two states. And it was voted favorably by the General Assembly of the United Nations, by joint session of Congress, by the European Parliament, and the whole leaders of the world would have come to Jerusalem to declare together with the leaders of the State of Israel and of the proposed Palestinian state, this is peace, we all for peace, we all will support it, and so on and so forth. 70% of the Israelis would have supported it, including all these 15 guys that you asked them in the street whether they trust the Palestinians or not.
Well,
believe me.
But you and I think agree that there is crisis of leadership today in Israel. Do you agree to that proposition?
There is certainly a crisis in the Labour Party.
Well, that's beside the point. The Labour Party did not really enjoy.
What do you want me to say? That I'm against the Prime Minister of Israel?
No.
I wouldn't say,
but
because that will be unfair. What I can say is this, that we have different ideas about how things should be run.
Okay, but
And naturally, I think that my ideas are better.
But other than yourself, that hopefully you will come back and lead the country. Do you see today any emerging leader in Israel? Really? I mean, do you see a person, a personality, someone? Can you name someone?
Look, a year ago, a young man who is a very good friend of mine, who was the most popular television anchor in Israel, retired, and the next day he said he will run for the next elections, and he became the second largest party in Israel. His name is Yair Lapid. He's a brilliant guy. He's a decent man. He's a man with natural abilities that were manifested in the way that he has worked it out from nowhere into becoming the second largest party in the state of Israel. So this is one person who one day, I don't know when this day will come, but in principle one day can be.
And do you really believe that Lapid has made thus far any contribution to the peace process?
Not yet, but he's not in charge of it.
Well, he's not in charge, but
this has been given almost exclusively to Miss Livni.
Well, and you really believe that Netanyahu trusts Livni to conduct the negotiation, or this is just a facade?
I like better your earlier questions.
I mean, no, but honestly, I mean, do you really think that Netanyahu gave Livni the mandate to negotiate in earnest?
I don't know. I don't know. I can't judge it by, the intimacy of the relations, which I'm not familiar with. I can judge it by the outcome.
But then again,
if I look at the outcome is that whether she was given or she was not given, I don't know. The outcome is not there.
But then,
that I know.
You talk just about Lapid.
Yeah.
And the negotiation currently between the Israelis and the Palestinians is in a crisis. There's very little progress was made. And he's part of the coalition, and he has yet to say one word about what's going on. Is this the kind of leader you really think is going to lead Israel to and make peace between Israel and the Palestinians?
Look, wait and see whether he talks and what he will say.
When will he talk?
When
will he talk?
How do you want from me?
No, only because
I can't speak for
name.
Netanyahu. I can't speak for... No, I said something which is objectively significant, The guy was a television anchor, and overnight, within a very short period of time, for the first time that he ran, he became the second largest party in the state of Israel. This is a very, very significant achievement which must be recognized and I think admired. And you have to give him the credit. Now, whether or not he does what needs to be done in his capacity at the present time, he's being Minister of Finance, to support the peace process in a certain direction or not, is a different question. I prefer that you will invite him also. You know, I can give you a good program for the entire year of whom you should invite to ask him the questions which I'm not in a position to answer. But I can tell you this. For me, the most important issue is this issue. I think it should be resolved. I think it can be resolved. I think it requires courage, leadership, inspiration, and perseverance by the leaders who are in a position to do it. The fact is that it's not done.
Well, it's not
it
done.
Needs to be done.
It's not done, and we don't see anyone today in Israel is in a position to deliver on any of these things. What's going to happen? For how much longer you think? And I want to go back to what you stated, and it's absolutely correct. There was the Arab Spring. People are dying by the tens of thousands, be that in Syria and elsewhere. And the Palestinians have been occupied for more than 40 years. For how much longer they will wait? I mean, this is a legitimate question. And now when you look at the Israeli political scene, you don't see one single leader who is saying a time has come. They talk the good talk, they walk the but they.
Well, the fact remains is that there was a leader who said the time has come and he has proposed something, and the Palestinians did not respond. So
but
that
that was,
you can't
that was
ignore.
7 years ago. That was 7 years ago.
It was 5 years ago. You can't ignore it. Pardon?
When you were there.
Yes, okay, but you can't ignore it. No, you say how much longer will they wait? So first of all, they were given an opportunity, and they didn't turn it down. They didn't respond, as I said. They should have responded. I hope, I believe, I think that it can be done. I think that there will be leadership that will do it. I think that the public opinion of Israel will come along. I think that the Palestinians will understand it. Don't ask me more because I'm not going to be more explicit about it for obvious reasons.
But when?
Soon.
When?
Soon.
Well, and I can only hope. You know, the truth of the matter, there is nothing you said that I disagree with. I just wanted to give you a little hard time. I mean, that's the nature of it.
I hope I didn't give you a hard time. Listen, no. I'm always prepared to accept a professorship in the NYU, but not in Washington, because I want to do it in New York.
I am from New York.
You are from New York also.
Yeah,
okay, so you tell your guys that I'm ready to accept it. I'm ready to accept it.
I want to invite you to come to New York anytime.
All right.
And perhaps you give us a lecture in my class.
All right.
Is that the deal?
Well, I don't know if you are rich enough to be able to sponsor it, but I'll always be happy to speak in the University of New York. I think I mentioned that one of my children and my daughter-in-law are both graduates of Tisch School of Arts, master degree in the New York University, so I have a certain, it's a soft point for me. And I will always remember how many hours the ceremony when Dustin Hoffman was telling all the history of his life, and he was at that time already close to 70, and it took him quite a while to describe, and I was missing my flight, but I stayed because my son was one of the graduates, so I have a special affection for New York University, and if you will invite me.
One short final questions, I want to turn to the audience for a few questions. Obviously, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, is extremely frustrated with the lack of progress being made. Now, suppose you meet him tomorrow. What kind of advice would you give him?
Believe me, I'll give him a good advice.
What is it? What is it? No, seriously. Can you share with us something about what you would tell him privately?
Look, you heard from me basically what my position is.
Would you tell him that?
Now, do you think that he needs to meet me in order to know what my position is? First of all, we are good friends. So he knows what I think, and while I was Prime Minister and after I was Prime Minister, I met with him many times, and I really have a very high opinion of John Kerry and his wife. Both are wonderful people. Now, if John Kerry will want to meet with me, he knows how to reach me, and I will not say anything that I'm going to tell him, because I think it's inappropriate, and it has become part of the way that people handle themselves, which I think is wrong. If you want to give an advice to an incumbent while he is in the middle of a very, very powerful, energetic, and courageous effort to bring peace to the two sides, you don't announce it through the microphones and through the papers. You can talk to him and tell him privately what you think, and believe me, this is a much more useful manner to do it.
I agree, but do you think it was wise on his part to say publicly that if there's no progress, there will be a third intifada? Should that be the signal that he should be sending to the Palestinians?
I don't think that this is a signal that he sent to the Palestinians. I think that this is the signal that he got from the Palestinians that he wanted to send to the Israelis.
But the
that
question,
was my understanding.
do you think this was a wise thing to do so publicly?
Listen, you must understand that the Secretary of State is committed to achieve peace, and is using every possible manner, every possible way in which he can influence the sides. I'm not his advocate. I'm not his.
But do you think that would really help him with Netanyahu?
We'll see. We'll see.
We're going to leave it at we'll see, but I'm not going to let you over the hook some next time around. We'll take a few questions from the audience, and we'll take it from there. Are you raising your hand to ask a question? Pardon? Okay. Give this microphone to this gentleman next to you.
He's there.
Right there.
Yeah, he wants
Why
to
don't
ask
you Why don't you ask the question first? But please limit yourself to a question, because
don't ask longer questions than the ones that were asked already.
I won't. Thank you for speaking. I saw you speak early last year at the J Street National Conference, and most of us here are Americans, so I'm wondering, does the changing sort of political winds in the U.S. have an impact on the state of the talks, and what can the American Jewish community do to push the current Israeli government to accept a reasonable deal?
You heard me speak there, and I hope at least that you didn't see any dramatic changes in my general attitude. I said there what I think, and I said here what I think, and it's more or less the same thing, right? This is one thing. The other thing is that I really don't think that it would be appropriate on my side to give advice how to lean on the Israeli government. When I am in Israel, I argue with my government, and I feel free to say whatever I want, because this is part of my life there, and that's what I need to do. To say to outsiders what they should do in order to influence the Israeli government to do the opposite of what they are doing and to have some brains, I don't think that I need to do it. But I think that what I said is quite obvious, so you can draw the necessary conclusions. Okay.
Thank you. I was struck by what you said about people giving advice in public, essentially, to leaders who are in sensitive negotiations. And since you served as Prime Minister, things have gotten more transparent, more secrets have come out. There's been so many leaks in foreign policy. Do you think that augurs well for peace talks? Does it make it harder to achieve peace? And do you think leaders need to find ways to be more secretive in how they're having these negotiations and discussions for them to succeed?
Look, when I was Prime Minister, I met with Abu Mazen, with Dr. Mahmoud Abbas, 36 times. no Israeli leader ever met with Arab leaders. If you combine all the meetings with all the Arab leaders from all the Arab countries 36 times. I met with Abu Mazen 36 times, privately. Nothing was leaked. This is the way I think secret and sensitive negotiations should be handled. Negotiating in a closed room and then going out and making statements is not the way in which I think particularly such a loaded situation as it is in the Middle East should be handled. I think it's a mistake. And I regret it. That's what I can say. I regret it very much. I think it should be done, it can be done, it ought to be done in a different way.
We have a mic here.
Your finger on the pulse of public opinion, which have to be swayed. To what extent is the point of view abroad in the land of Israel that the Israelis will have to take permanent control of the West Bank, either because of total pessimism the Palestinians will ever make a deal, or out of religious belief that God gave Israel, Judea, and Samaria, or because the settlers are becoming more prominent politically, will make the job of swaying public opinion in favor of peace all the harder.
I entirely disagree with the idea that the Israeli public opinion is by and large right-wing. When I ran in 2006, the Likud together with Lieberman, both together had 23 seats in the Knesset, which is very insignificant. In the Knesset before this one, the previous one, they had 43 or 44 seats. Now they have 31, so they lost almost more than 25% of their power. If there will be a leadership that will challenge them, and particularly challenge Netanyahu, and will present a different program, I think that there is a likelihood that the combination of forces that will support it will be stronger than the right-wing parties to start with. I don't know that there is any religious principle that requires that all of the West Bank will be sovereign by the State of Israel. This is ridiculous. Not that I don't think that it is part of Jewish history, it is. But when you want to make peace and you need to make a compromise, I mean, what is the significance of making a compromise if you give up something which you yourself declare not to be used in the first place? What's the big deal? If you think that the West Bank is not used, then what the heck are you doing there in the first place? On the other hand, if you want to achieve peace, you have to weigh the options. What is more important? To have a greater territory at the cost of losing the nature of your country, or to give up some of the land in order to protect the nature of your country? I always say that when my parents made Aliyah to Israel from China, of all places, in 1933, they came to Israel to live in a Jewish democratic state and not in a Palestinian state. And therefore this rhetoric of these messianic voices of some religious people is strange, is aligned to the nature of what the state of Israel should be. And there is no alternative but to pull out from those territories in order to make peace. We have to reach an agreement, and I believe that we can reach an agreement. And I don't see any existence for the state of Israel as a Jewish state with 5 million Palestinians that will eventually become a majority that will be part of this state.
But that's going to will have to include the evacuation of nearly 100 settlements scattered all over the West Bank, with the exception of the three blocks along the 1960s.
I don't want to go into this argument how many will have to be evacuated.
But they are there, all over, scattered all over the West Bank. I am for exactly what you stand, 100%. And I'm talking about in terms of realistic terms. Are we going to be in a position, you are the Prime Minister, to evacuate over 100 settlements that may have more than 150,000 settlers?
We will need to move from there according to the most recent map that I have in my mind, because I'm not in a position now to offer maps, okay? But just the one that I'm familiar with, we will have to move out of the present places 80,000 people. Of these 80,000, I think 60,000 can be moved into the parts of the territories which will remain under the Israeli sovereignty as part of this swap. So in other words, the dilemma for many of those who live now in the territories will not be that they will be evacuated entirely from the land of Israel, which was promised to the Jews by God, but which they will have to leave from one place which was promised by God to another place which was promised by God, and therefore they will not be kicked out from the territories altogether, because Jews are not allowed to live in the territories. This is a big difference. Now, for instance, Gush Etzion. Gush Etzion was Jewish even before the independence war. Everyone knows that it will remain part of the state of Israel. Why can't we build there 40 towers with 40 floors each? They will make apartments for 20,000 people. What's the big deal? We can do it. We did it in Tel Aviv. We can do it in Beitar. So it will not be, and the apartments will be very spacious and very comfortable and very modern. And the roads will be the best roads, and there will be trains and everything else. So let's not exaggerate in the ability to change reality on ground. Things like that happened in a much grander scale in the history of mankind, in previous periods in history when it was a lot more difficult and more complex and more costly to do it. We can do it. It has to be done with the utmost consideration and sensitivity for the people that live there. And I'm not talking about brutally forcing people out. I'm talking about taking decisions that will determine the future of the existence of the State of Israel. These are decisions of historical proportions that someone has to take. And if it will be taken, there will have to be a price paid by some people. But this is what you do when you want to change history.
Yeah, I agree with you, but there was one thing that under your administration, there was this major conflict on the settlement of Ariel. Would you include that in any kind of peace agreement with the Palestinians?
Professor Ben-Meir, when I'll negotiate with you, we'll come to this point. I have to negotiate with Abu Mazen.
We'll take one right here.
There is a gentleman over there also.
Most of the discussion is centered about opposition by the current Israeli government to take the necessary steps to make a deal. And the only reference that you made, Prime Minister, is to, with respect to the Palestinians, was to the failure of Mahmoud Abbas to give you a response to your proposal. What makes you think that the Palestinians have the kind of will that could take the kinds of steps that they repeatedly claim that they won't? Specifically, their charter, both Hamas and the Fatah charter, talk about a Palestinian state from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, and the right of return, which is probably the one biggest stumbling block of all. If they're serious about a right of return, if they're serious about regaining the lands of Israel, which are in their maps as Palestinian lands, with no mention of Israel, and the evidence of their continued incitement, all argue against their making the kinds of decisions and compromises that you speak of.
Look, you have outlined some of the issues that that were part of the disagreement and part of the controversy between us and the Palestinians for many years. Some of them are irrelevant anymore. Some of them are still on the table of negotiations, just as the demands from the other side, from our side, are still on the table of negotiations. But we both know that what is realistic and what is rhetoric, what can be done and what may be said. And these are two different things. If you ask me, I think that what I have proposed is very, very, very close to what the Palestinians will settle for as an agreement. And if they will settle for an agreement, now, for instance, we come with this, I think, childish demand that the Palestinians will declare that they accept Israel as a Jewish state. Do you think that I need the Palestinians to recognize me as a Jewish state? Do you think that the existence of the state of Israel depends on whether Abu Mazen will say that he recognizes me as a Jewish state? If we'll make an agreement on the basis of what I've said, then by its very nature, Israel will be a Jewish state because it will have 80+% Jews, and therefore it will be a Jewish state. And if we will not do it, then Israel will not be a Jewish state because 50% of its population will not be Jewish. So, there are certain things which are raised because they are good arguments why not to move forward in the right direction. And there are certain other arguments which are put on the table. In every negotiations, there are always things that are laid there for the event that you need to disagree. But when you want to agree, you just throw them away. And in all my life, I always tried, whenever I dealt with another side for negotiation, say, do me a favor, start from the end. Don't fool me around with all the arguments from the beginning. I know them. Start with the end. What do you want? What do you really want? And I must say that when I dealt with Abu Mazen, we very rapidly, we came to the point where we started to talk business. And none of these rhetoric was part of it.
Thank you so much, Olmert. Prime Minister, I want to call you back Prime Minister because that's where you should be again and soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your candor, for your straightforwardness,
Thank you.
for your ideas, and for your determination. And I look forward to seeing you again in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And
all the best to you. Bye-bye.